The sound of joy, the afternoon sun, filtered through the tall windows of the Blackwood mansion, casting long golden rays across the polished marble floors. Richard Blackwood sat in his study on the first floor, surrounded by leather-bound books and mahogany furniture that spoke of old money and careful preservation. He was reviewing quarterly reports, but his mind kept wandering. It had been 3 years since the accident. 3 years since his wife, Catherine, had died in the car crash that had also left their daughter, Emma, unable to walk. The doctors had said Emma was lucky to be alive, but Richard often wondered if his little girl felt lucky at all. He ran his hand through his greying hair and sighed. At 42, Richard had everything money could buy: a mansion in the wealthiest part of town, a successful investment firm, cars he rarely drove, and rooms he never entered. But the house felt empty. It felt cold. Emma was 7 years old now, and she barely spoke to him anymore. She spent most of her days in her room upstairs, a pale shadow of the vibrant child who used to run through these very halls, laughing and calling for him to play. Richard had hired the best physical therapists, bought the most advanced wheelchair, and enrolled her in every program the specialists recommended. But nothing seemed to reach her. She had retreated into silence. Richard had tried in his own way. He would knock on her door each evening and ask about her day. Emma would respond with one-word answers, her eyes never quite meeting his. He told himself it was grief, that she was mourning her mother just as he was. But deep down, he wondered if it was something more. If perhaps she blamed him for not being there that day, for not being able to protect them. 6 months ago, he had hired Clara Morrison as a live-in caregiver for Emma. Clara was 28, fresh-faced, with warm brown eyes and an ever-present smile that Richard found almost irritating in its persistence. She came highly recommended, with certifications in pediatric care and physical therapy assistance. But more than her credentials, there was something genuine about her that made Richard agree to the arrangement, even though he hated the idea of a stranger living in his home. Clara had her own room on the second floor, near Emma's suite. She took care of the child's daily needs, helping her dress, managing her exercises, ensuring she ate properly. Richard paid her well and stayed out of her way. It was a professional arrangement, nothing more. But lately, Richard had noticed something changing in the house. Sometimes when he came home from work, he would hear faint sounds from upstairs, sounds he couldn't quite place. And once or twice, he thought he heard something that made his heart stop, something he hadn't heard in 3 long years, Emma's laughter. But surely, he told himself, he must have imagined it. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. Richard had left the office early, troubled by a headache and an unusual restlessness. The house was quiet when he entered through the front door, setting his briefcase down in the foyer. He loosened his tie and was heading toward the study when he heard it again, laughter. This time there was no mistaking it. It was Emma's voice, clear and bright, floating down from the second floor. The sound was so unexpected, so impossibly precious, that Richard stood frozen at the bottom of the grand staircase, his hand gripping the banister. His heart began to race. Slowly, almost afraid the sound would disappear if he moved too quickly, Richard climbed the stairs. With each step, the laughter grew louder, accompanied now by music. Something cheerful and upbeat playing from a speaker somewhere. Emma's door was slightly ajar. Richard approached quietly, not wanting to disturb whatever was happening inside. Through the gap he could see into his daughter's room, and what he saw made him stop breathing altogether. Clara was there, wearing a simple white shirt and jeans, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. And she was dancing, but that wasn't what made Richard's world tilt on its axis. Emma was dancing too. His daughter sat in her wheelchair in the center of the room, decorated with white flowers woven through the spokes, gerbera daisies, her mother's favorite. Clara had taken Emma's small hands in hers, and together they were moving to the music. Clara would twirl gracefully, then come back to Emma, guiding the child's arms in sweeping motions. Emma's face was radiant, lit up with pure joy as she moved her upper body in time with the rhythm. "Now we spin." Clara announced dramatically, and she twirled Emma's wheelchair in a gentle circle. Emma threw her head back and laughed, actually laughed, with such genuine happiness that Richard felt his eyes sting with unexpected tears. "Again," Emma cried out, her voice full of life. "Spin me again," Clara obliged, her own laughter mixing with Emma's as they spun together in the afternoon light streaming through the windows. The wheelchair became part of the dance, not a limitation, but a prop in their shared performance. Clara moved with such grace and care, never making Emma feel like she was anything less than a true dance partner. "You're getting so good at this," Clara said, breathless from the movement. "Soon you'll be teaching me." "Do you think—" Emma hesitated, her smile faltering for just a moment. "Do you think Mommy would have liked our dance?" Richard's hand went to his mouth. He pressed himself against the wall outside the door, his vision blurring. Clara knelt down in front of Emma's wheelchair, taking both of the child's hands in hers. "Oh, sweetheart," she said softly, "your mommy would have loved this. She'd be so proud of you. Not because you're dancing, but because you're finding joy again. That's what people who love us want most, for us to be happy." "I miss her," Emma whispered. "I know you do," Clara replied, brushing a strand of hair from Emma's face. "And that's okay. Missing someone means they were special. But you know what? We can miss them and still have happy moments. Your mom would want you to dance and laugh and live. She'd want you to fill this big house with joy again." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she said in a small voice, "Do you think Daddy would want to dance too?" Richard's breath caught in his throat. Clara glanced toward the door, and for a moment, Richard thought she might have known he was there all along. "I think," she said carefully, "that your daddy loves you very much. Sometimes grown-ups forget how to show it, especially when they're sad. But maybe if you asked him, he'd remember." Richard couldn't stay hidden any longer. He pushed the door open gently, and both Clara and Emma turned to look at him. Emma's expression immediately became guarded, her smile fading. It broke his heart. "Daddy," she said, her voice uncertain. Richard walked into the room slowly, and he was surprised to find that he was crying. He didn't try to hide it. He knelt down in front of Emma's wheelchair, just as Clara had done, and looked into his daughter's eyes. Really looked at her, for the first time in months. "Emma," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I heard you laughing. It's the most beautiful sound in the world." Emma stared at him, her lower lip trembling. "You're not mad? Mad?" Richard shook his head. "Why would I be mad?" "Because," Emma struggled to find the words, "because I'm happy and Mommy's gone. I thought if I was happy, it meant I didn't miss her anymore." Richard felt his heart shatter and mend all at once. He reached out and took his daughter's small hands in his larger ones. "Oh, my sweet girl, no. Being happy doesn't mean you've forgotten Mommy. She would want you to be happy. She would want both of us to be happy." The tears came then from both of them. Richard pulled Emma into his arms, careful not to hurt her, and held her as they cried together for the first time since Catherine's death. All the grief they'd been holding separately came pouring out in that sunlit room, and it was painful and healing all at once. When they finally pulled apart, Emma looked up at her father with red-rimmed eyes. "Daddy, do you want to dance with us?" Richard looked at Clara, who stood quietly to the side, giving them space. She nodded encouragingly, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. "I would love to," Richard said. "But I have to warn you, I'm not a very good dancer." Emma's smile broke through like sunshine after rain. "That's okay. Clara can teach you. She's teaching me." And so, as the afternoon light continued to pour through the windows, Richard Blackwood learned to dance with his daughter. Clara started the music again, and she showed him how to move with Emma's wheelchair, how to make the chair part of the dance, rather than an obstacle. They spun and swayed and laughed together, filling the empty mansion with sound and life for the first time in 3 years. Richard felt hope as the days turned into weeks. The dancing became a regular part of their routine. Richard started coming home earlier from work. He would join Clara and Emma in the afternoon, and together they would dance. Sometimes they talked about Catherine, sharing memories and tears. Other times they simply enjoyed being together, rebuilding the connection that grief had almost destroyed. Richard also began to see Clara differently, not as an employee, but as the person who had given him back his daughter. She had understood what Emma needed when he had been too lost in his own pain to see it. She had brought joy back into their lives, one dance step at a time. The mansion slowly came back to life. Rooms that had been closed were opened. Laughter echoed through the halls, and in the center of it all was a little girl in a wheelchair, decorated with her mother's favorite flowers, spinning and dancing and learning that life could still be beautiful, even after loss.